Throughout human history, the desire to attain eternal life after death has driven people to build countless monuments, from pyramids to underground tombs. But sometimes the most perfectly preserved bodies are found not in man-made monuments, but in nature's own merciless embrace, the summit of the world's highest volcano, an altitude of 6,700 meters. This is what climbers call the death zone, where the air thins, oxygen drops to 50% of sea level, and freezing winds strip flesh from bone like a razor. Life cannot endure here. There is only wind and silence. But in 1999, when archaeologist Johann Reinhardt and his team climbed this impossible peak on the Argentina-Chile border, they saw something glinting beneath the ice. It wasn't a rock fragment or a lost piece of climbing gear. When they began to dig, what emerged from the frozen ground stunned the scientific world. There was no skeleton, no decayed corpse. In front of them was a young girl, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, as if she had just sat down, gently bowed her head, and drifted off to sleep. Her clothes were colorful and spotless. Her braided hair was undisturbed. The peaceful expression on her face looked like someone caught in a dream. But she wasn't sleeping. She had been there for 500 years. Scientists named her La Doncella, the Maiden. She was the best preserved mummy in the world, surviving from the height of the Inca Empire. Her preservation was so perfect that researchers could see her blood frozen in her veins and count her eyelashes one by one. So lifelike it felt as if she might wake if touched. Yet behind this haunting beauty were terrifying questions. What was a 14 to 15-year-old girl doing alone on the roof of the world? How had she gotten there? And most importantly, what kind of death could lie beneath that calm expression? The answers would emerge after centuries of silence under the cold light of modern science. The Maiden was carefully lowered from the mountain and placed in a special cryogenic capsule at minus 20 degrees Celsius in the Museum of High Altitude Archaeology, MAM, in Argentina, designed to replicate the conditions of the summit. She was no longer just an archaeological discovery. She was a cold case. Researchers couldn't perform an autopsy without destroying this fragile body. The knife had to be replaced by light. The Maiden was taken from her capsule to a hospital and placed inside a CT, computed tomography, scanner. Forensic pathologist Dr. Richard Shepard and his team waited tensely as the images appeared on the screen. Were they looking at a murder? Inca rituals could be brutal. Other victims had shown skull fractures, signs of strangulation, or weapon wounds. But the results were unexpected. Not a single bone was broken. There was no sign of blunt trauma to the skull, no evidence of strangulation in the neck tissues. Her internal organs, her brain, even her heart, were still in place as if she had died yesterday. There were traces of infection in her lungs, but not severe enough to be fatal. There was no physical violence, so why would a healthy young girl die on a mountaintop? That's when the detective work passed to the bioarchaeologists. The answer wasn't in her bones, it was hidden in her perfectly braided hair. Hair is the human body's black box. Growing about 1 centimeter per month, each strand records what you ate, drank, and what substances you were exposed to, like a chemical timeline. When bioarchaeologist Dr. Andrew Wilson analyzed samples from the Maiden's long hair, he was able to read the final 2 years of her life. And what he found told a tragic story. The tests showed a dramatic shift in her diet about a year before her death. Until then, she had eaten a peasant diet, mostly potatoes and vegetables. Suddenly, she began consuming corn and llama meat, a protein and carbohydrate-rich diet reserved for elites. This matched historical records perfectly. That change marked the moment she was chosen. In the Inca Empire, there was a class called the Akla, or Virgins of the Sun. The most beautiful, healthy, and perfect children were gathered from across the empire, taken from their families and brought to the capital, Cusco. There they were, trained by priestesses, treated as sacred, and made to live like goddesses. This girl was one of them. Her status rose, her life transformed. But that luxury came with a price. She was being prepared to be sent to the gods. Hair analysis revealed not only the beginning of the story, but the grim end. When Dr. Wilson focused on the months closest to her death, near the root, he saw a sudden spike in the chemical data. In the final 6 months, her consumption of coca, the plant that cocaine comes from, rose dramatically. In the Andes, coca was a sacred plant used to fight altitude sickness and hunger. But the amount in her system was far beyond normal use. Even more striking, only a few weeks before her death, heavy alcohol use appeared alongside the coca. The alcohol was chicha, a fermented corn beer. When scientists mapped these findings, the route of her final journey came into view. She had likely set out from Cusco and began a pilgrimage lasting months, thousands of kilometers toward the volcano, accompanied by priests and other offerings. A male tunic found in her burial suggested her father may have traveled with her as well. In Inca belief, this was an honor for the family. Drugged with coca along the way, the girl must have begun slipping away from reality. As the climb to 6,700 meters began, thin oxygen and brutal cold pushed her body to the edge. At the summit, the temperature was around minus 30 degrees Celsius. The priests gave her one last high dose of chicha. The scans confirmed she had eaten and drunk a large amount right before death. Her stomach still contained it. Faint traces of vomit at the corner of her lips and wear on her teeth suggested stress in her final moments, and perhaps her body reacting to the alcohol, but that expression said everything. After putting all the evidence together, Dr. Shepard identified the cause of death, hypothermia. But this wasn't the agonizing, shivering death climber's fear. The maiden was in a deep trance, dulled by coca and alcohol. Her awareness was blurred. She didn't feel pain, didn't perceive the cold. When the priests seated her in a small stone chamber they had prepared at the summit, she likely didn't resist. They straightened her beautiful clothes, placed miniature figurines and ornate dishes beside her, and then left her alone, perhaps covering her with one final shawl. Sitting there, she slowly drifted off. The numbness of alcohol merged with the sleepiness brought on by extreme cold. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing became shallow, and finally it stopped. No pain, no scream, only a passage into endless silence. Science can explain the chemical truth: alcohol intoxication, hypothermia, altitude. But the emotional truth of that moment is far more complex. Today, the maiden still sleeps in a specially designed glass chamber at the museum in Salta, Argentina. Visitors often struggle to hold back tears, because what stands before them isn't a pile of dry bones or an Egyptian mummy wrapped in bandages. It's a human being, hands folded in her lap, so lifelike it seems as if she's still breathing. To the modern world, it's a tragic death, but to the Inca people 500 years ago, she was an envoy, a sacred messenger sent to speak with the gods, to save her people from drought and famine. For centuries, the ice protected her. Time could not rot her away, and 500 years later, she is still here, whispering the secrets, beliefs, and fears of a vanished world through every strand of hair, every trace within her body. Science showed us how she died, but the question of why she was there still hangs inside that glass chamber on that peaceful face. The period when La Doncella set out toward that summit, toward what the Incas believed was the home of the gods, was the empire's golden age. Stretching along the Andes, the backbone of South America, this vast civilization was far ahead of its time in engineering, agriculture, and architecture. Power radiating from Cusco controlled a territory spanning thousands of kilometers, ruling with unwavering devotion to the sun and the sacred mountains. But this magnificent empire was standing on the edge of one of history's greatest tragedies. Only a short time after the maiden drifted into her deep sleep on that mountaintop, Spanish ships appeared on the horizon. Steel-armored men, and the deadly diseases they carried brought this extraordinary civilization to its knees within just a few decades, looted its cities, and pushed its culture to the brink of destruction. Thank you for watching. If you felt the icy breath of history at your neck and want to keep hearing the stories of the past's silent witnesses, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next discovery.